Welcome to the Writer Reads Chronicles of a Dark God, Book 2, Dark Gods Rise, Chapter 42, The Gods Assist. In the city-state of Caranth, power poured over the wizards, priests, and warriors gathered in the chapel of all gods. It soothed their hurts, calmed their grief, and settled their fears. The gods descended, filling the chapel with their presence and covering their exhausted servants with recuperative power. The city's ruler, Lord Night Endurer, leant against a massive beast of earth and stone, having collapsed from exhaustion against its side. Far from being offended, the creature moulded its body around him, ensuring he didn't fall. "It is done," the Lord Knight whispered. It had been meant to come out as a firm declaration, but the whisper was all that emerged. The elemental didn't seem to notice, but rumbled a reply. "The first stage is complete," it corrected. The air stirred gently above them, its words coming to them as a sigh of warm spring air. The earth elemental translated its response. "Our cousins of water and fire beg your forgiveness," it said. "There was nowhere to accommodate their forms, or they would have given their power also." "It is of little consequence," Endura told it. "What was able to be given has been given. We could ask no more than that." The stone floor of the chapel rippled, and Endura stiffened with tension. The creature supporting him rumbled soothingly. "Be still," it said. "My brethren come to offer their support and protection, while your people rest. Do not fear. Their bodies form a circle of protection about those you call your own." This wasn't entirely true, but Enduro didn't have the energy to school the creature on the difference between those he was allowed to call his and those on whom an alliance was his only claim. He glanced toward the bodies lying in the inner circle and began to weep. The elemental enclosed him further, and he heard its words through the gathering mist of tears and weariness. "Not all those you see are dead," it said comfortingly, "and the gods protected the souls of those that perished. They are all safe, all safe. No harm can come to them now." The Lord Knight felt the confirmation of his God ring deep within his soul. The feeling grew stronger until his whole being rang with it. Strong hands cupped his face, and he opened his eyes. Staravan stood before him, his hands touching Endura's face. The Lord Knight gasped in startlement, then reached out and gripped the god's wrists, growing still as the god spoke. "Peace, Endura, Lord Knight of Caranth. Be at peace. We will watch over you now." Endura relaxed reluctantly, feeling his grip on the god's wrists loosen as his eyes drifted closed. He was barely aware when Staravan took his hands and lowered them to his lap, and thought it a dream when the god looked to the earth elemental supporting him. "Thank you, my friend," he said. Endura felt the creature shift and forced his eyes open long enough to see it bow its head to the god. As his lids drifted shut again, he thought he saw Staravan reach out and lay a palm against the side of the elemental's face and murmur a soft blessing. The elemental remained still, rumbled a soft thanks, and stayed where it was, while Staravan moved toward the next of his servants. Around the circle, the other gods were doing the same, with Sophriel a glaring absence from their midst. From the midst of the circle, Raomar continued the watch as the Lord Knight drifted to sleep. One of the wizards glanced around as though looking for Sophriel, and then bowed his head, pressing a fist to his lips. Not even the presence of Sophriel's sisters was enough to comfort him. Raomar almost let his eyes drift shut, partly to give the man some privacy in which to grieve, and partly out of weariness, but a familiar red-haired figure caught his attention. Other mages wept, but Alessia raised her head in the centre of the circle, and then she rose slowly to her feet. Her gaze drifted from one wizard to the next, and Raomar didn't feel tired any more. Like him, Alessia had noticed the magic user's grief. Unlike him, magic sparkled across her skin in response, and she stepped in close to the nearest mage. Raomar watched the tension in the man's body fade and the quiet shaking of his shoulders cease. He imagined he could even feel some of the sadness dissipate from the room. As he pondered that, Alessia moved to the next mage, and then the next. Her footsteps took her to where the human goddess Stellana knelt beside the elven deity known as Fianre. The goddesses comforted the elven lord Magriel or Darkenoak, and it took Raomar to realize that Sophriel had been the deity of magic for the elves as well. In fact, when he thought of it, he realized she had been the only deity of pure magic in existence, and that her worshippers had come from every race across the realm. And now she isn't coming back, he thought, pushing himself a little more upright. Better able to see, he watched as Alessia knelt before the elf lord and touched his forehead. Power rose around her, and Raomar stifled a gasp. Magic was something he was used to feeling, but this magic felt like it had a will of its own. It took the edge from Magrillo's grief, then pulled at the wizardess until she followed it to another sleeping mage. Stellana and Fianre followed, and Raomar caught their whispers as they passed. Does she know? Stellana asked, but Fianre shook her head. Not yet. She's only now becoming aware of her power. Stellana made to move toward Alessia, but the elven deity laid a restraining hand on her arm. She's not yet ready. She has been chosen but not told, and I do not know why. Stellana looked around and sighed. I can offer no real comfort here, she said, but the dead I can at least prepare for burial, or the flame. Do that then, Fianre instructed, and do not fret over the wizardess. She is no threat to you, nor to your sister's place in your heart. Stellana's only reply was a shrug before she faded to nothing, and Raomar watched Fianre turn to another elf. Magic might not be her domain, but the elves were, and she could at least comfort her wizards on that front. She was still moving between them when Raomar's eyes finally drifted closed. He didn't know how long he'd slept. All he knew was that Enshul's perfume lingered in his nostrils, and Staravan's concerned face stared into his own. My lord? He asked, too tired to startle, and Staravan rose. Get up, the god told him. I must speak with those gathered here and make your role official. Raomar did as the god bid. As you wish, my lord. He felt Staravan's arm around his back, steadying him as he stood, then felt a quiet surge of strength and was able to stand on his own. In his mind's eye, he saw the body of the wizard who had been torn apart by the weirds, and relived the sensation of the man's body dragging at their hands. Another image followed, this one of Walshira's nets falling from the ceiling of the courtyard and being cut from a screaming mage by the power of Alessia's magic. He shook his head in an attempt to dispel the image and felt Staravan's hand brush his cheek. The pain, but not the memories, dimmed, and Raomar wiped his eyes. It is good to grieve, the god told him. That way the pain won't tear your heart to pieces. Now attend to my words. Raomar felt the god leave and looked up to watch Staravan step onto the dais at the end of the room. The other gods followed, including the elven deities who let the Lord of Gods take the lead, and who did not seem to resent the fact that in this task he had been elevated above them. Raomar joined the rest of those who had made the scry journey to the mountain as they rose and gathered at the foot of the dais. He felt the breeze that blew from nowhere when Staravan began to speak, and saw the creature that had made the gods stop before any words left his mouth. It was winged, partly serpent, partly horse, and partly man. It appeared from nowhere to land lightly before the Lord of Gods. Closing his mouth, the Lord God turned toward it. Neither Raomar nor any of those gathered with him heard the words that passed between them, but all heard the grave tone of Staravan's voice when the messenger had bowed once more and disappeared the way it had come. Listen to me, the deity began, and Raomar marvelled that Staravan could think they'd do aught else. The Old One seeks to end his captivity, and he has almost gathered enough energy to give him the power to do it. He paused, looking around the gathering before continuing. We must act to repair his prison in the citadel before he can use that energy to escape. Even now his servant, the King of Deverath, Gasps interrupted him, and he was forced to wait until the shocked whispers that followed had died away. The king of Deverath has sought out and captured enough wizards and mages to grant Walshira the power to do as he wishes. We have until the second dawn from now to seal the Old One's voice from the world, for good. He stopped as someone called out from amidst the gathering. And how exactly do we stop it from happening again? Staravan's face grew fierce, and Raomar shrank from the fury in his glance. When he spoke, the deity's voice was angry. We take the citadel and place a guardian within its walls, and our guardian trains others in the art of containing the Old One's dark influence. He paused, scanning the gathering, then continued. And we set guards to roam the lands in search of any seduced into gathering the souls the Old One needs to fuel his power. Only then will we have any hope of ensuring he is contained and remains so. And we must ensure the Old One's presence is not forgotten again, the Lord Knight Endura added, earning a sharp glance from the god. He straightened beneath it, pushing away from an elemental's supporting bulk and briefly meeting the deity's gaze, then bowing his head in respect. And Raomar acknowledged the man's courage. Foolhardy to add to a deity's plan, he thought, but brave, and perhaps an ally for the future beyond the Old One's containment. Staravan favoured the Lord Knight with a nod and went on. In addition to unearthing such servants, the god added, those in the citadel must be dedicated to putting his willing servants to death, and either holding their names and betrayal in record or expunging their memories from all who knew it. Raomar closed his eyes at the impossibility of the latter and earned himself a godly glance. Then we hold the truth of their deeds in record for all who knew them or come seeking what befell them, Staravan agreed, and Raomar released a breath he hadn't been aware he'd been holding. He tensed when the deity's attention remained on him, and Staravan spoke again. To this end, I appoint Raomar Philomath, my chosen high priest, and once high priest to Anshul, and once of the Kavarag, to stand as my watchman against the dark, and to act as the citadel's guardian in my stead. He turned his gaze to Grunwald and continued, and I appoint the Northman, Grunwald, once of the Ice Plains, as his protector. His attention returned to Raomar. High Priest Philomath is charged with finding and appointing suitable personnel to fulfill the citadel's requisite complement. He stopped and scanned the room, his eyes moving from face to face and pausing to acknowledge each one before he spoke again. I wish you well in the battle to come, and swear you will have all the assistance the gods can provide. Murmurs of agreement rose from the other deities, and the oath was repeated in myriad forms as they confirmed their support in the war against Walshira. The humans and elves in their midst looked around with wide eyes, then gasped as light flared and the gods vanished. Raomar blinked, forcing his breath to calm as he searched the temple for them. When he did not see them, and they did not reappear, he took a deeper breath and let it out slowly. What's next? He wondered. Deep beneath the citadel, the opal continued its journey toward the garden's center. The stream had taken a different path to the one needed, and the earth elementals had struggled up from the mountain depths on their own. The largest of them had supported the gem above its head as it closed the earth and stone behind them with its tail. The second largest moved ahead of them, clearing the way, and the other four assisted in carrying it or removing any obstacles that had been missed. None were aware of the sunrise touching the cliffs above, and the messenger's deadline drew ever nearer. On the walls of Caranth City, at the mountain's foot, the sun's first rays touched Raomar's face as he stood beside Alessia and the Lord Knight Endura, and lifted his face to the warmth. The light reminded him of the flare that had left the gods' silhouettes imprinted above their respective altars, and on sections of the wall that would require new altars to be built. Raomar had not been the only one to draw comfort from that etching, or to notice how the shadows made him feel as though the deities still lingered. It reminded him and the other priests that they were never alone. Remembering the silhouettes, Raomar opened his eyes and found he had more courage than he could justify.